Good morning, everyone. We'll give it a couple more seconds before we start this fantastic webinar. Glad you could all join us on this Monday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you happen to be. All right. Well, welcome. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Returning to Basics Successful Advocacy 101 webinar. Whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, your presence here matters. I'm John Picard from Faces and Voices of Recovery, and I'm honored to moderate today's event. This series is proudly hosted by the Colombo Plan, the International Society for Substance Use Professionals, ISSUP, Faces and Voices of Recovery, and the Global Recovery Network, GRN. These organizations are working together to strengthen recovery systems worldwide. While we are waiting for a few more to join us, I will begin by saying a little about ISSUP, a membership organization for the global substance use workforce with over 35,000 members worldwide. It is an international network that unites, connects, and shares knowledge across the substance use prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery support workforce. ISSUP's global mission is to make the work of members as impactful, accessible, and effective as possible. They do this by making it easier to discover and share evidence-based knowledge, best practices, training, and network opportunities. If you've not done so already, please head over to ISSUP's website, issup.net, issup.net, where you will find information on how to sign up for a free membership. The website also has a wealth of resources and publications for you to enjoy. You can watch recordings of past webinars and see future event listings. I'd like to take this moment to thank the ISSUP staff for providing technical support for this webinar. This is a 6-part series taking place every other Tuesday, concluding on September 30th, International Recovery Day. Each phase of the series focuses on building knowledge and capacity across 3 areas: core foundations of recovery, returning to basics, and leadership development. Today's session launches our Return to Basics phase. So today, we journey into our Returning to Basics Advocacy 101. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenters for today, Dr. Andre Johnson and Christina Ravello. A warm welcome to both of you, and it is a great pleasure to have you with us today. So a little bit about the speakers. Dr. Andre L. Johnson, a native Detroiter, is currently the founder, president, CEO of the Detroit Recovery Project Incorporated, DRP. DRP is a trailblazing, multi-service, nonprofit agency that promotes a wide spectrum of prevention, treatment, and recovery support services to the city's recovery community. DRP is the first recovery community organization in the state of Michigan designated as a certified community behavioral health clinic. Dr. Johnson has consulted on behalf of the United States President Emergency Plan Against AIDS abroad to the Department of Ministry of Health in Dar es Salaam and Zanzibar, Tanzania. Dr. Johnson was appointed by Kathleen Sebelius, the former U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, to serve a 3-year term from 2015 to 2018 as a National Advocacy Advisory Council member for the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. Dr. Johnson taught addiction studies and mental health classes at Wayne County Community College. He is a past member of the 3rd Judicial Circuit Court Family Division Drug Court Team. Dr. Johnson is a board member of the Wayne Center, which is an agency that provides services for the mentally ill and developmentally disabled. The United States President, Barack Obama, recognized Mr. Johnson as the 2016 Champion of Change for Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery at the White House. Dr. Johnson completed his clinical internship at the approved American Psychological Association site at Tarzana Treatment Center, treating 12 to 18-year-olds with substance use and mental health disorders in Tarzana, California. In 2023, Dr. Johnson was appointed to serve as a member of the SAMHSA National Advisory Council. Dr. Johnson holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Morehouse College, a Master of Arts degree in organizational management from the University of Phoenix, and a Doctor of Psychology in clinical psychology from Michigan School of Psychology. Dr. Johnson recently published his book, The Recovery Ecosystem, A Holistic Approach to Recovery, a guide for healing and progress in the journey of addiction recovery. Christy Aravello is the Program Associate for the Global Health Advocacy Incubator's core team, that's GHAI. In this role, she works across all program areas to support the organization's capacity strengthening work. She also supports organization-wide marketing and visibility initiatives. Prior to joining GHAI, Christy completed a master's degree in public policy from the University of Maryland. She has previous advocacy experience in a wide range of issue areas, including global health and health equity. Christy speaks English, Spanish, and French. So before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you all know how to participate in today's event. Today's session is in English with interpretation available in Spanish. Please check the link in the chat to access the Spanish interpretation. This session will be recorded and you'll receive the slides, video, and resources via email after the session. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to our presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the webinar interface on your screen. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. And if you could also direct them to either Dr. Johnson or Christy, please. And now it is my pleasure to hand over the webinar to our esteemed presenters. Dr. Johnson, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much for that warm introduction, John. I'm thrilled to be here to be part of this conversation around successful advocacy. Let me just make sure I got everything right here. So I'll start off with just some of the fundamentals of advocacy, really kind of, advocacy versus lobbying, which is a thin line between the two. But here, as you can see, this slide really points out the bottom line about advocacy is being able to increase awareness, and it's also an opportunity to educate people about, particularly as we think about faces and voices of recovery, addiction, stigma. We can never, ever talk enough about that. But ultimately, advocacy is about increasing, raising awareness, and educating people, because some people don't know about the issues that we are passionate about. Now, lobbying is an attempt to influence legislation or perhaps government decisions. And so we like to point this out, particularly because if you work for a nonprofit organization, and depending on the status, whether it's a 501c3, we are not allowed to lobby. However, we are allowed to engage in advocacy. So there is a distinguished difference between the two. And it's important that we know this, because we who are here today ultimately want to be actively being a proponent of advocacy moving forward. And now when we talk about advocacy, ultimately we're talking about activists and advocate. An activist is someone who takes direct action to promote, protest, or demand change, often in public and visible ways. And I'm sure we all can think about all the stuff that's happening both in the United States and abroad around people who are actually taking action, who may oppose some type of decisions. But then when we talk about the actual nuts and bolts of advocacy, is to support a cause that will ultimately influence policy change. And that's through education, that's through dialogue, town hall meetings, conversations, and perhaps strategic engagement that's often within systems. And that's something that Faces and Voices of Recovery has been really, really good at doing over the years. Now, when we think about key features of social advocacy, we're looking at focus on social justice, like equality, if there's a such thing, perhaps community centered. What's going on in a particular community is a community centered approach, or a multi level engagement, or an intersectional approach. And again, ultimately, when we're working towards social advocacy, we're also giving voices to marginalized communities, meaning that these are the communities whose voices often go unheard, challenges unjust systems and norms, influences public policy and cultural attitudes, builds solidarity and collective power. Common tools and tactics. And again, we see a lot of this on TV. We may see it in social media, but ultimately, public demonstrations and protests is a common tool. Social media campaigns, another common tool, and it gives you that opportunity to talk about something that you may be passionate about, but it also gives you that exposure. And then this one, which I really resonate with personally, is the storytelling and the lived experience sharing. And one of the things we've done a lot around recovery support services, and also just being able to have a recovery message that we use on a national basis in terms of telling our story. Our approach to even telling our story is really key. And then coalition building, because coalition building brings a lot of outside opportunities where people of various backgrounds can join a coalition for the greater good of whatever the advocacy goal is, whether it's to focus on increasing funding for opioid use disorders, or perhaps making sure that a opioid use disorder treatment program is in your community, because we know a lot of communities don't have the resources it needs. And so coalition building, policy briefs, and petitions are another strategy that's often used to um, uh, promote advocacy. And then educational workshops and community forums. Those are just another approach to really increase awareness and opportunity to engage your community as well. Now, when we talk about advocacy, we often talk about the big A and the little a. And there's a distinguished difference, and I'll talk a little bit about the big A. The big A is a more formalized, organized effort that influences public policy or legislation, and is often led by professional advocates, nonprofits, coalitions, or lobbyists. Example, lobbying policymakers to pass a mental health parity law, or campaigning for national drug reform policy, or perhaps filing briefs or testifying at legislative hearings. Those are all direct examples of the big A. And then when we talk about the little a, advocacy, we're talking about everyday actions that raise awareness, support individuals, or promote change at a personal or community level. And anyone can be referred to as a little a in advocacy. And that's typically parents, teachers, peers, and community members. And examples include helping a friend access addiction treatment, or it can include speaking up at a board meeting about student mental health, or perhaps sharing personal stories on social media to reduce stigma. That's an example of the little a in advocacy. And now we'll talk a little bit about grassroots and grassroots mobilization, which is two different aspects. One is engaging everyday people, especially those directly affected by an issue, to take collective action towards whatever the issue is. Um, and then grass stops. And let me just correct myself. I messed up earlier. I said grassroots and grassroots, but I meant to say grassroots and grass tops mobilization. And grass stops mobilization is when engaging influential individuals such as community leaders, business executives, or respected professionals who have direct access to the decision makers. So there's a distinguished difference between grassroots and grass stops. So grassroots, again, is engaging just everyday people, especially those that's affected by an issue, to take collective action. Now, I'll spend some time and just talk about the 8 key principles of effective advocacy. One is clear goals and objectives. 2 is evidence-based messaging. 3 is strategic communication. 4 is stakeholder engagement. The 5th one is policy and systems understanding. The 6th one, flexibility and responsiveness. The 7th is monitoring and evaluation. And then obviously the 8th is ethical and inclusive practices. Remaining ethical in everything that we do is always key to advocacy. Now I'll talk a little bit about building relationships and coalitions. One of the first things that we recommend is amplify your voice. Make sure your voice is being heard. Combine expertise and resources. And that helps to ultimately build legitimacy and trust. And as you build legitimacy and trust, it also helps to understand that we have to continue to encourage sustainability. We have to be able to navigate the opposition, and we want to simultaneously promote inclusive advocacy. And those are just some key components to building relationships as well as coalitions. Identifying local and global stakeholders. For example, know who the policymakers are, know your state government leaders, know your city, county officials, know your state representatives and legislatures. And then know the people with the lived experience that represent their organization to be part of the overarching goal of advocacy and supporting whatever the cause is. And again, we know in our cause and in this space, the focus is on substance use disorder, and it's often around destigmatization, increasing funding, et cetera, et cetera. Know who your community leaders are. It's good to know your community leaders. Know who the civil society organizations are in your community, and have some also insight around who are the academia community that's influential, whether it's a community college or a university in your town. Media, always important to have some media resources that's potential, again, local or global stakeholders. Health and social care workforce, professional associations, so School of Psychology, School of Social Work, as well as the organizations like the American Psychological Association, the American Public Health Association or the American Social Work entity. And so those are entities that we know end up working in our field, so to speak. And so it works really well when we can begin to marry and build potential um, stakeholders through a cross-section approach. And so we talk about private sector. You may be able to tap into a executive from Coca-Cola, just throwing that out there, or philanthropic organizations and foundations. Every community has both philanthropic organizations as well as foundations, and being able to recruit those individuals to be part of stakeholders can be very critical for your advocacy group. And then obviously UN and other international organizations, and I hope you all see that's very relevant just by the fact that now we are linked up with ISSUP, which is an international organization. And it makes a lot of difference because we can begin to push our advocacy goals both locally, national, and international. So, I will lead you with a couple things as I wrap up, and we'll hear from our next speaker, Christy. But I want to just leave you with a couple questions to think about. One is, how do you determine whether a stakeholder is an ally, opponent, or neutral party? What are some ethical considerations when partnering with powerful stakeholders? Example, corporations and government. And then I'll leave you all with 5 things. Imagine you can, honor and share your journey, find your people, prepare and know your choice, and be courageous and ask. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. That was very informative. And now we're going to hand it over to Christy to talk about more advocacy, especially something called Hatch, the Health Advocacy Training and Collaboration Hub. So, Christy, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you for taking the time to be here, everyone. So my name is Christia Revelo. I am a program associate at the Global Health Advocacy Incubator, and I'll begin by providing a brief overview of the Global Health Advocacy Incubator. So we are a global health organization and we focus on policy change. So our way of working is that we partner with civil society organizations in low and middle income countries who are working on policy change campaigns for public health issues in their country. And so we partner with them to provide technical support, and we focus quite heavily on capacity strengthening. And together we work toward policy change to create sustainable population level public health improvements. And I'm going to post the link to our website in the chat here if anyone is interested in checking out GHAI's website. So as part of our work, we work across many different issue areas. One of them is, in fact, overdose prevention, and that is one of our only United States-based programs. So that's how we came into this network of global substance use and recovery advocates. So it's a pleasure to be here today. And today I will be talking about 2 things: the Advocacy Action Guide, which is a resource we developed for advocates that takes people through our organization's approach to advocacy and some case studies and templates. And I'm also going to be talking about Hatch, which is our online learning hub focused on creating a hub for learning and communication between health advocates worldwide. So, beginning with the Advocacy Action Guide, this is a toolkit that we have developed based on about 10 years of global health advocacy experience. And it's based on not only our experience, but that of our partners around the world. GHAI works with civil society advocates in approximately 60 countries around the world, and those advocates work across a very broad range of issue areas. However, we found that over the years, people, regardless of what issue they're advocating on, the strategies that they're using to fight for that policy change, they do run into similar challenges. They do have similar strategies and skill sets that work very, very well. And as Dr. Johnson was saying, there are quite a lot of core tenets of advocacy that they hold true regardless of what you're working on, where you're working, and what exactly you're trying to do. So that is what the Advocacy Action Guide gets into, is the common approaches and best practices and challenges that we've found that hold true across all of the areas that we work and everyone that we work with. So this is, again, our approach to it. There are many ways to do advocacy, but this is based on what we do, and it's focused on policy change. So we broke it down into 4 broad phases, and then within each phase there are multiple steps. So the first phase that we have is analyze. That is the background research, all of the preparation that goes into a campaign, likely before it's really kicked into gear. The second phase is collaborate, and that is coalitions, partnerships, all of the things that we know through experience. You cannot do advocacy by yourself. You just can't. You need strength in numbers. You need other perspectives. It's really key. Phase 3 is advocacy. And that's what many people would consider to be, having events, having rallies, meeting with decision makers, some of the capital A advocacy. And then phase 4, sustain, is after a policy has been passed or changed, whatever you were pushing for in your campaign has happened, how do you keep that momentum going? And so you may notice that this graphic here is a circle, because we understand that advocacy is not linear. It also never ends. So we've presented this approach as a neat, simple, it's clean, it's easy to understand. But we know that in reality, advocacy is often not like that at all. You're usually jumping between the different phases. You're usually working on many phases all at once. And again, advocacy is really never ending. So even as you are planning a campaign, you might be still analyzing some of your previous work and understanding how your previous actions can inform future work and vice versa. So we understand that it's not as simple as it looks on screen, but this is the way that we have found to distill it for easier explanation. And now I'll go into a little bit more detail on each of the phases. So the first phase is analyze. And so that is where we would encourage advocates to conduct a landscape analysis to get all of the background research needed for the work that they hope to do. And in this phase is where you would also, based on the research that you've done, based on political research, based on legal research, based on really any background research that you have, determine what your specific policy objective is going to be. So at GHAI, we focus on policy change, and so this is where we encourage people to go beyond awareness raising and think, what is the actual law that you want to change? What is a regulation that you want to get put into place? So getting really specific. From there, you have to assess what are the possible pathways in order to get that law in place, to get that regulation changed. What are the practical options? And then from there, putting all of that information to have what we call a political mapping. And that's something that we get into in the guide, but it's essentially a big grid or map or spreadsheet or whatever works for you that contains all of your information, all of your possible options, and how you might go about achieving those options. And then from there, we move on to phase 2, which is collaborate. So as we've mentioned, advocacy cannot be done in a vacuum. You can't sit in a room by yourself and pass policies. You just can't do it. So that's why we decided to name this phase Collaborate, because it is all about the planning and mapping out of the steps and the process for an advocacy campaign, but it's also something that absolutely cannot be done on your own. You have to reach out to partners. You have to be part of coalitions. And all of that campaign planning, all of the strategic planning, all of the communications planning, ideally should be done in partnership with all those other people. So this phase includes, it included building partnership and reaching out to policy champions as a specific step to make sure that people are doing it, they're building it into their work. We also included strategic planning, which is, campaign planning, that's how we talk about it, and communications planning, because we've seen that communications is a really critical part of advocacy work. And we've seen in our experience that when communications planning and outreach to members of the press and social media planning, when all of that is really built into a campaign from the beginning, it leads to the longest lasting success, and it sets campaigns up very nicely to run smoothly, and it provides documentation of the work that happens, and it sets advocates up very nicely for future work as well. So planning that communications from the beginning and making sure that you are working with other people in your networks is very important. Phase 3 is the actual, what we consider to be the most visible part of advocacy. But again, we loop that in closer to the end of the advocacy cycle, because at GHAI we do really value the background research and the planning as really core parts of successful advocacy work. So that's why the capital A advocacy comes until phase 3 of our approach. So this is where we have people meet with decision makers. And so these can be members of parliament, members of Congress, city council members, or it can also be their staffers. It can be lawyers that they work with, people who aren't necessarily the elected leaders, but who have information and access and power to make decisions or to speak with decision makers. So we do encourage a broad view of who decision makers are. But this is the phase where advocates would be meeting with those people. They would be implementing their communications campaigns and raising awareness of the issue in order to build public support as well for an issue. So this is where rallies would be happening. This is where press conferences would be happening. All of this in phase 3. This phase also includes countering opposition, because it's an unpleasant part of advocacy work, but sometimes it does happen. And we encourage advocates that we work with to be prepared to deal with perhaps misinformation campaigns or people who are opposed to the issue, perhaps discrediting organizations that are doing advocacy work. And this is where advocates are encouraged to take a broad view of what may be considered opposition, because often in public health work that we engage in, we found that there isn't a clear organization or group that is directly opposing, childhood immunizations, for example. The opposition that we speak of is perhaps more lack of government funding or lack of awareness about the issue. So that's the step where advocates are really encouraged to think broadly about things that may be holding back their campaign and planning to work around those in order to really push that policy objective over the finish line and to get a bill turned into law or have a regulation put into place to support a law that was previously passed. All of this in service of achieving that policy objective. And of course, the ideal outcome of phase 3 is that whatever your policy objective was, it passes and it has the public support that it needs to remain popular, and it's done without undue influence from potential opposition. But this isn't the end. A very important part that we've seen in our work is not only getting a policy objective passed, but making sure that it stays in place. So making sure that a budget allocation continues to be funded years into the future, or that a regulation that gets passed is legally sound enough to remain in place. So this is where we consider phase 4, sustain, to be a really key part of the advocacy process. So it begins with monitoring the implementation of your policy objective. So that includes just keeping up to date with what's happening with the policy objective that you were working so hard on, making sure that it's actually going into effect, that the people responsible for putting it into effect know about it, because that's something that happens quite a lot, that they have the resources that they need to put it into effect, and that they know who to reach out to for more information or for more support. And that's something that the advocates that we work with really, they're quite good at, is maintaining relationships and serving as a source of information if people who are responsible for implementing a policy objective, if they need additional research, knowing who to go to get that information. Another thing that we have found helps a lot is defending policy. Sometimes legal challenges may come up, and so it's important to be prepared for that and to be prepared to defend the policy objective that has gone into place. And lastly, but not really lastly because this is a circle, refining the campaign itself is a key part of the advocacy process. So reflecting on all the work that you did in the past 3 phases and analyzing what worked well, what didn't work well, how you can improve for the future, and how you can continue to plan for improvements to the policy objective that you just passed, or perhaps if it didn't go as well as you wanted it to, how you can take a step back, continue to do more research, continue to do more campaign planning, reach out to a broader network of other advocates, how you can continue on the long-term policy advocacy journey. Because I think we all know advocacy takes time, it takes persistence, it takes flexibility, and it takes creativity. And it can be challenging, but this is a tool that we'd like to share in the hopes that it will be helpful to this group of advocates. And the guide itself also contains quite a lot of case studies from GHAI and from our partners around the world who work across, again, many different areas of public health advocacy, but they have found lots of common threads between one another, which is a really unique part of the Advocacy Action Guide. The guide itself also contains templates to get people started on campaign planning, to get people started on landscape analysis, to get people started on communications planning. So we tried to design it based on our own experiences, based on our partners' experiences, and based on what advocates want and have found useful in the past in our work together. And I'm going to put the link to the Advocacy Action Guide in the chat, and it's available out on GHAI's website. It's available for download in English, Spanish, and French. And it's also available for download on Hatch, which is the next thing that I will share. So Hatch is a new resource from GHAI. It's called the Health Advocacy Training and Collaboration Hub. The link to it is available on screen, as well as a QR code that takes you to the homepage as well. So the Health Advocacy Training and Collaboration Hub was made by health advocates for health advocates. So it's an online platform that is completely free to use, and it contains resources from GHAI and from our partners around the world. So it's a repository, a library of toolkits, of case studies, of webinars, of interactive courses, all focused on public health advocacy. And because GHAI is a global organization and because we work across many issue areas, Hatch is reflective of that. So our resources that are on there are issue specific, some of them. Some of them are focused on nutrition or road safety or tobacco control, but we also have quite a few resources that are cross-cutting. So we have a full-scale interactive course. It's all about the Advocacy Action Guide, which I just spoke about, but it's a more hands-on way to go through the content, to test out your understanding of it in real time. And I'm just posting on screen what is available on Hatch. So we also would like it to be a platform for supporting peer-to-peer engagement around the world on public health advocacy. So what that looks like in practice is having networking opportunities available for that coalition building, for that network building that we spoke about in the Advocacy Action Guide section of this presentation. So we all know that advocacy does not happen in a vacuum, and so we want Hatch to be a place where people can get to know one another, get to understand who else is working in the advocacy space that you are working in, how you can get to know one another, how you can support one another on your advocacy journeys. Because we may all be working on different campaigns, but we're all working toward a healthier world on a broad scale. We're all teammates in that journey. And so we want Hatch to be a place where people can network and get to know one another in that way. And getting into more detail about what Hatch actually contains, it contains toolkits, it contains case studies, it contains webinars from our partners. It also contains quite a few downloadable templates for advocacy planning, for monitoring, for analysis of the work that you do, just to get people started on the actual nuts and bolts of advocacy planning. It also contains interactive e-learning courses, and all of this is available on an app as well, because we understand that advocates are busy, are often on the go, and so we wanted to make Hatch from the beginning as accessible and mobile friendly as possible. So if you're in an area that doesn't have the most stable internet connection, all of our resources are designed to be fully functional with low bandwidth, and everything has been designed to be easily viewed and easily accessed on a cell phone. And most of the resources on Hatch are also available in multiple languages. So again, we are a very global organization. We understand that our audience is very global. So we just designed Hatch with that in mind, and also reflective of the way we work. Many of our resources were already available in multiple languages, and so we built that into Hatch as a core principle. And just to reiterate, everything on Hatch is completely free to use. There is no cost to users, and the platform is publicly available. So you don't need to be one of our partners to be able to use Hatch. It's available to the public. However, we also have robust security measures in place to ensure that the platform remains a safe place for advocates to learn and to share with one another. So we've been able to find that balance, luckily. So for people who are interested in accessing Hatch and for learning more about it, there's a QR code on screen that you can scan, and it will take you to Hatch's homepage. You can also go to the link on screen, learn.hatchadvocacy.org. From there, you will be prompted to create a free account. And once that account has been activated, everything on Hatch is available to you completely for free. And we do upload new resources to Hatch on a monthly basis. So keep an eye out as we will be constantly uploading new courses, new toolkits, new templates, new webinars, and we will also be rolling out new features of the platform quite regularly. So we hope to have more robust community chat forums in later on in 2025, and we are always looking at new features that we can add to the platform to make it as functional as possible for our users and to make it as accessible as possible for our users. I think that's all I have. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And I will now hand it back to the organizers of today's event. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them during the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you, Christy. That was a great presentation, and learned a lot about this new global tool. And yeah. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Johnson, Christy, for that incredible, thoughtful, and powerful presentation. So keep your questions coming in. If you have any, please. Luckily, I have a bunch, so we'll definitely have a robust discussion. But one of the ones that came in right off the bat was Dr. Johnson skipped a couple slides right at the beginning. And those couple of slides are something that Faces and Voices puts into every slideshow when we do a more interactive type of audience. So when people can be on camera and speak and really have dialogue between the presenters and the attendees. I'm not going to share my screen, but it's a slide called Safe and Brave Agreements. And the safe side talks about being non-judgmental, listen deeply, be open-minded, have understanding, have empathy. This is confidential space, and offer grace for people that are early on and learning, and also be brave. So the brave side is verbal and nonverbal communication. Encourage, have acceptance, respect others' opinions, share your experience, and value differences, similarities. Have some encouragement, some gratitude, take space and make space. So that's one of the things that we generally start out with before we get into a really in-depth discussion between presenters and attendees. The other thing that I wanted to make note of is a global advocacy campaign that's currently going on right now, which is called Support Don't Punish. It's www.supportdon'tpunish.org, and I'll put that in the chat. And it's a global advocacy campaign that really is trying to the drug control system is broken. It's in need of reform. People who use drugs should no longer be criminalized. People involved in the drug trade should not face harsh or disappropriate punishments. The death penalty should never be imposed for drug offenses. Should focus on health, well-being, harm reduction. Drug policy budgets need rebalancing to ensure health and harm reduction-based responses are adequately financed. So the WHO is a part of this as well, the World Health Organization. So yeah, key components of the strategy are public education campaign, media and influencer engagement, corporate dialogue, community mobilization, a lot of things that Dr. Johnson and Christy talked about today so far. So with that being said, I have some questions, but again, continue to put questions in the question box so we can have a really open and good dialogue. But my first question is to Dr. Johnson, and I want to get local. I think starting out at that local kind of level is really important. You're not going to go to the your U.S. senator right off the bat. You have to get what I really want to know is what are the ways that you have advocated for Detroit Recovery Project, and what did local advocacy really look like when you started? Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of started from a coalition perspective. I helped build a coalition that was comprised of community leaders, religious leaders, the business community, members from the public school sector, et cetera. We had like 12 sectors that we were very intentional with as it relates to building our coalition. And once that occurred, we were able to decide a approach. So, for example, here in Detroit, many years ago, we were able to sit down with Detroit City Council and talk about the box. The box meaning individuals who had a history, like a criminal justice history and a felony on their record. We were able to influence our local government to take the box off the city of Detroit job applications. So it's wins like that that gives us an opportunity, one, to kind of build a relationship, establish a reputation in our community, but also we now have access to our city council's office, our mayor's office, as well as other elected officials. We have elected officials on our board that represent our local, state, and government, county as stakeholders. So I think it's not a one size fit all. It really depends on your community and your community resources and the people that you have access to. Did that answer your question, John?
It does. I guess my you know how do you get access? That's the toughest thing for people to start out. I know I'm working with somebody down in Florida, um, who's like just starting out, and they're like, I don't know how to get access to those people. Yeah, to those
Well,
people that are the decision makers that have a couple of extra bucks in their pocket to start. Yeah.
yeah, that's always the number one question. How do you get in touch with people? So, my approach has been really, it's about knowing the people, like studying what they may believe in, what they're passionate about, who they know that we know in terms of mutuality, and just being genuine about the cause. But knowing who your local government, I think, is a key component, and they should know who you are. Who you are. So, if you're in Miami, Florida, or Fort Lauderdale. We need to know who the city government are. And we need to sit in on some of the meetings, sit in on some of the, follow them, so to speak. I don't want to say stalk them, but if I had to go somewhere like Florida and I don't know anybody, I would be going into the churches. I would be finding out where the city council public hearing meetings are and just begin to slowly educate and introduce myself to individuals about what I do. And then I would, slowly say, hey, is it possible if if our coalition can present to you some incredible work that we're doing in the Florida area to raise community awareness? I've found, I'm in the city of Detroit, so you got to find who your influential people are. Like here, our religious community is very influential and have access to government a lot more than some lay people, so to speak. And so I think it varies from community to community. What do you think about that, John?
I think you're right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's that's good. And to follow up with that with Christy, your collaboration phase. So it's such a tough phase. How do in the work that you've done, and especially in policy, how do you not get discouraged when people are just kind of giving you the stop sign or saying we don't want to have anything to do with you, or how do you not get discouraged in that collaboration phase? Because unfortunately, not everybody is going to say yes, and honestly, in this Now, granted, the world is changing in our favor, gratefully, in the recovery movement. But how do you not get discouraged?
Yeah, thanks, John. That's a great question. And it's something that the advocates we work with run into quite often. It really just comes down to resilience and creativity. I think it helps to remember that advocacy it's a long-term game. You know, small setbacks in the short term they're upsetting and they're difficult, but you just have to keep trying. Something like a more practical thing that we found that helps is doing a lot of research to understand who is already working in this space. What are their, as Dr. Johnson was saying, what motivates them? What's important to them? And thinking creatively about how you can go about building connections, building genuine connections with organizations and individuals who may align with you on some parts of your work, and about being flexible and being a genuine community member, about being a team player, and being above all committed to the long-term goal, and showing that you're you're in it for the public health wins, and staying persistent, keeping your head up, and staying creative in pursuit of, in our work, like changing policies to save lives ultimately, because that's what public health is.
Great. I really appreciate that. I'm a person in long-term recovery from an SUD, and it's they say isolation is sometimes just as bad as the disease itself, and isolation in advocacy. Advocating to yourself is a waste of time. So reaching out and trying to get as many people on your side is such an important part of that. And Dr. Johnson, following up on that thread, how do we make ourselves stand out in this recovery movement? The nonprofit world it's big, and there are so many needs out there. Granted, intersectionality is an important part of our movement in recovery, but how do we really make ourselves stand out in that advocacy, and especially advocating for policy change?
Sure. Great question, John. Myself, I'm a person long-term recovery as well, 37 plus years, and I'm constantly thinking about how do we be more creative in this space? How do we be more innovative in this space? And how do we continue to build stakeholders of all walks of life? I think that's going to really be key. Trying to do stuff by yourself is not the approach for advocacy. It's about advocacy building coalition of stakeholders for the greater good. So I think being able to make those connections, being able to show the intersections like Christy talks about in terms of the public health community, is so much solo going on. So you got the public health folks over here, the psychology folks over here, the social work folks over here. Instead of us saying, hey, it's intersection. We're all working with the same people. So let's figure out a way to raise the bar. Let's figure out a way to change the standards of care for treating patients with substance use disorders or mental health disorders. So I think it's a matter of bringing professionals and lay people together for the greater good and having dialogue. Because we talked earlier about having that dialogue, having that conversation, and then what's our end goal? What's our clear goals and objectives? For me, it's always going to be about making sure we can treat people who are struggling with SUD on demand. Just like if somebody needs to be treated for a gunshot wound or anything traumatic in a hospital, we need to have treatment available for all, period. And So for me, it's how do we get to that point? And the only way we can get to that point is by establishing some short and long-term goals to say these are the goals that we want to achieve, perhaps over the next 3 to 5 years. And here's the objectives in terms of how we're going to achieve the goals. But we're going to keep these constant campaigns going. We got to have constant campaigns about recovery, constant campaigns about the harm of opioid use disorders, constant campaigns about breaking the stigma, destigmatization, not just a one hit and it's over with. We have to be consistent.
Awesome. Absolutely. And for everybody on who's attending, we are going to be talking about stigma in 2 weeks at the next webinar. So, this is a tough one, and it gets in my way when I'm advocating and talking to different people. Although, again, I try to be non-judgmental, and I'm going to pose this to Christy and most likely Dr. Johnson right after, is how do you set aside those other issues to make that broad coalition in the advocacy phase? Meaning that you're trying to get that big tent, but some of those people in that tent, you really kind of like, well, they're not as shall we say, compassionate, empathetic for certain other issues that you may be. So how do you get through that? Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Yeah, no, that huge part of coalition work is the interpersonal like relationship management. That's something that we just deal with all the time. About like not only, I mean, it often people talk about it as conflict management, between organizations and between people. But we take a broader view than that. It's also about like understanding differences and like different priorities, and about understanding what's going on so that, ideally things don't turn into conflict. But really, really key to advocacy work is the people management of it, is just understanding relationships. And again, it's also like understanding the stakeholders, and everyone is coming into this work from a different place with different perspectives, with different motivations, or pressure from perhaps like a funder or from their organization, that impacts the way that they show up to these spaces and the way that they engage in this work. And so we consider it to be really important to just understand who was in the room, understand who they are, and how you can best work with them. It's just about like doing your research and understanding what spaces you're walking into, who else is going to be there, and also how your presence or your organization's presence may impact people. Um, I think what we've seen in advocacy work at GHAI is that it really boils down to understanding yourself as an advocate and understanding your organization and how you impact other people, other organizations, and how you can best manage those relationships to keep things focused on the work that you're all pushing for.
Awesome. Yeah, and as an example, one of my local RCOs, they put a Facebook post. So they're having an event in a month for Recovery Month, and one of their sponsors is a local marijuana dispensary. And somebody commented on that social media post, how could you have a marijuana dispensary as a sponsor to a recovery community center? And they had some really good comebacks, some explanations like this. this organization, this community, they are a community member. And people use marijuana for medical reasons, for harm reduction reasons. So they are a member of our community, and they support our mission. And that's what it's all about. Dr. Johnson, I'd love to get your take on the big tent issue that you may have run into over the course of your advocacy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can become healthy. It's all in how we approach it. For me, it's really aligning as best possible what individual strong points in terms of how it all kind of ties into the greater good of what it is that we're aiming to achieve. Um, I remember years ago when I was part of Face and Voice of Recovery and I was on the board, something happened. And what happened was the perfume company, I think it was Christian Dior, came out with a product and they named it Addict. And they had this very salacious type um, addiction orientation to the commercial. And at that time, I remember we all came together from around the country, Tom Hill, Tom Coder, and we challenged um, the promotion and the title of that product. And I remember how some people had their own agendas. Um, and that agenda was to take this as an opportunity to leverage their own personal opportunity. And I'm talking about in terms of like career or employment opportunity. So I think for me, what I learned, but one is we did manage to be effective. The floats flew in from Europe and they sat down with our U.S. team of recovering advocates, and they took in consideration our concerns about why we did not want this product to promote the use of addict. But so what I've seen over the years, though, John, has been people often have agendas that don't align with our agenda, and I think we have to be able to point that out in a very healthy way, and just say, perhaps let's revisit our agenda, let's revisit our stakeholders' goals and objectives, and let's be honest with ourselves as it relates to everybody being on the same page to pursue the goal. And I think just that kind of approach, you can sometimes weed people out who may not be here for the cause, so to speak.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Um,
Yeah.
all right. Let's see. I have some more questions here, or at least, yeah, I got a couple more. So, Christy, this is for you. And I'd like to have your insight and knowledge about world affairs. But currently, right now, the United States government is going through a fairly big shift, shall we say? And how do we as advocates, part of that sustain piece, how do we sustain during changes in government, be it small ones or kind of large ones? And do you have any examples in kind of like the global sense in different countries that have gone through some of these drastic changes in government policy?
Yeah, so the current situation in the United States it's been really, really difficult for people in the global development space. At GHAI, lots of our partner organizations and organizations within our network have been really significantly impacted in a way that is detrimental to global health, and it's really scary. But we're getting through it as best we can. We've seen a lot of our partners and our colleagues who are just immensely resilient and creative. And this is a time that we've really seen people just pivot and like work with their networks to figure out, where are alternative sources of funding to continue the work that some of the organizations we work with are doing. Um, about building coalitions or about leaning into coalitions that people are already part of, and just keeping in mind that like the resources and funding are really tight right now, but the willpower and motivation and people power to improve global health is still very much present. And it's, we've been speaking to our partners, and people are really just, I think, falling back on the idea that advocacy and global health is a long term game. Um, these are really big setbacks that are really difficult right now, but it's not going to be like this forever. And so it's been helpful to focus on what we can do right now in order to like ensure the future of global health. So it's also about like a lot of documenting uh, what's happening right now, about sharing resources with one another, sharing information with one another, so that if and when things get better, we are still prepared and in a good place to kick the work back into high gear. It's about doing what you can right now to at least stay in the game and be ready to keep working, um, when things get a little easier, but significant challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't stop, can't stop.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the challenges are broad. And Dr. Johnson, I'm wondering how you're dealing with it. Are you reaching out more to your local state governments, possibly private foundations that hopefully will be a little bit more benevolent in the near term, because of the loss of the federal funding that's going to take place here pretty quickly. So how are you kind of adapting with this change in government and hopefully not huge change in policy?
Sure. Not like what Christy said. We're pivoting. We're remaining steadfast in the work that we do, and we're also exploring other options in terms of philanthropic and foundation organizations, corporations. When we were first established, we were heavily 100% government funded, and so this situation, at least for me, has woke me up, awakened me to not just rely solely on one source of revenue. And so we're looking at being creative, meaning that we may have to scale down some services over the next few years. We'll do that and do whatever we need to do to make it happen. But in the meantime, we are reaching out more to our local and state government to say, hey, are there any type of funds that can help supplement some of these other funds that we no longer have available to support our community? So it's a constant uphill battle. It's a constant uphill battle. And I think that's just the name of the game. At the end of the day, the pendulum swings back and forth all the time. And so I thought when it could never get no worse than the pandemic. Um, I thought to myself, how we're going to survive, how we're going to make it. We survived the pandemic and we made it through the pandemic. And so we will continue to survive and thrive during hardship periods. Not give up, but keeping that faith too is important. Keeping the faith and not losing sight of why we committed to doing this work. That has to be the driving factor to the work that we do, you know?
I do. I do. Let's see. It looks like we have probably one more topic that we can talk about, and I'd love to hear Christy's knowledge and about equity. Equity on a global scale, which is a little bit different than. And I'll talk to Dr. Johnson about equity on a local scale. But yeah, how can this movement, how can we sustain and make sure that we are being equitable across, different continents, different countries, and different needs based on those locations?
Yeah, great question. So GHAI works in a lot of different areas of public health, but something that we've seen consistently is that it's really important to know who is most impacted by a given issue and to have evidence to back that up when speaking with policymakers. Wherever possible, to do research at the local level, to do like community level polling, to interview people, to really like have as much local data as possible, and to go from there, work with local advocates who are they're already doing the work. They already know the right people. They already have the information, and to just understand how you can best support people who are local experts, and to like again bring those to the right people, um, and to really focus on the the people who are most directly impacted by the issue and what they want, what they have said that they want. Like all of our work, we really emphasize locally led and locally driven advocacy work. So all like any national level campaign that we work on for any of our health issues, it's all based on data and advocacy networks that are as local as possible. And then we go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. And to Dr. Johnson, since Christy mentioned data, I'm a big data geek. We've had, what was it last year? We had almost a 20% reduction in opioid overdose deaths in the United States. However, when you really peer into the data, the Black and Indigenous communities have not seen that reduction. It's actually gone up a little bit. How can we, as advocates, make sure that we are, pointing that light on that statistic to make sure that funding and the information that's being provided is equitable to those communities?
Yeah, I struggle a little bit, John, with the word equitable, only because I don't think I've ever really seen what equitable look like in the Black community. Here in the city of Detroit, marginalized community, 80% of the population are Black people. But we also represent the highest number of unemployment. We represent the highest number of individuals in our prison system here in the state of Michigan. We're double digits in Detroit compared to our entire state. And so when we talk about equity and health disparities, we see the numbers. I think the data is driven, and I think the question that you posed around how do we do this collectively? How do we ensure that if we know we're a predominant Black organization or a predominant white organization or a predominant Latino or Hispanic, etc. How do we make sure we have a nice blended group of people that reflects the ethnicity of our communities, of our culture? And how do we make sure that we all have an equal voice to perhaps identify the goals and objectives of what it is that we're trying to accomplish? I mean, because right now, when I lived in Los Angeles and I met a bunch of colleagues who work in the treatment system, and these guys making 15, $20 million a year off of 50 clients a year. Unbelievable. But right here in the city of Detroit, my colleagues who may have an average budget of $100,000, $200,000, and they've been in business 20 years, are struggling. Where nonprofits are constantly struggling. And so I just think it's so many areas that we can focus on when we talk about equity. There's funding equity, there's service orientation equity, and then I think really taking a true look at our numbers. Yes, OUD numbers have decreased in our country, but in the state of Michigan, they've increased significantly by 25, 30% among people of color, Black people in particular, who are still dying of overdose of opioids today. And so I don't want to go down this soapbox, but the, the reality is it's a lot to do, and I think as it relates to equitable, I think it's important that we really even identify operationally define what that means to our community and our culture at large.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And Christy, thank you as well. We have about a minute for kind of last words, Christy, if you'd like to, and Dr. Johnson, about a minute each, if you have anything else to say about where we are and where we're going.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to the team of organizers for putting this together and for having me join. The team at GHAI is really grateful for this opportunity. We're thrilled to be here and to continue working together. Times are tough, but so are we.
I love that. Times are tough, and so are we. Dr. Johnson?
I just want to piggyback and say we got to keep fighting a good fight. Thank you, John, and please give Patty my regards and the entire team at Face and Voice of Recovery for continuing to be a part of this. ISSUP, keep doing what you're doing. I'm planning to attend the ISSUP conference, I think, in the next month or so, somewhere in Cape Town, South Africa, I believe, in October. And Christy, thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel with you. You were absolutely excellent. And let's keep fighting a good fight.
That's right. Awesome. Again, thank you for helping us continue this series with the wealth of experience that we need to advocate for recovery. And thank you to all who were here and attending. So as we've heard today, recovery is not one size fits all. It is shaped by personal experience, by culture, access, and community support. And as we continue this journey together, we invite you to reflect on how your work can honor and uplift those affected by substance use disorder. So you'll receive a follow-up email shortly with the webinar recording, the slides, additional resources. Please also take a moment to complete the short feedback survey. We'd love your thoughts. And we will see you again in 2 weeks at the same time, same date, well, 2 weeks from now, as we continue our returning to basics phase with words matter, language and stigma reduction. Until then, thank you again and take care.